welcome back to the channel. In the last video I showed you the mesh brush V2 and now it's in the Blender market. You can go Blender market or Gumroad to grab that, and also Patreon you can get some discount or even for free. And in this video I'm going to show you how to build mesh brush in the basic form of it. It's similar to the one of my oldest video, which is the very basic one. After that, you have a better idea about this node, and I will briefly talk about more complicated whole node tree. You can get some idea. Maybe you can develop your own node tree top of that. Without further ado, let's jump in. So now let's further discuss about this mesh brush, and I will try to break down this a smaller section and also make a simpler version of this. Let's take a look at this. It's only like longer grill. Use delete geometry to delete some part of it and also to delete the end of it. So let's take a look how to make this grill first. First, we drag in the curve, which is this. Okay, so we set it to be relative. So let's first use a curve to mesh. Then use a line, curve line. Put it over here, and it is too big, so let's set it. Now we got this, but actually we need to make it like even for the both sides, so it's this. So now we already have this kind of like a grill. We need to resample this to have more detail, so just resample this to use the lens, depend on the length of it. So for cross grill. Okay, now the grill looks fine, but it's best it looks longer instead of equal like a cube. It's best it looks a little bit longer like that, but maybe even more detail because later we need to delete some of it. So now we actually have this mesh, and let's use delete geometry. Set this to be face. And actually we delete everything, but that's not what we want. We just need to delete some part of it, so maybe we can use a noise texture and use a compare. To 0.5 and make it more detail. Okay, so now you see we do delete some part of it, but what we want is to delete the end of the curve. You might think we can just use spike parameter, which is the output is for the vector of the string. Here's 0, here's 1, something like that, and it doesn't work because right now it is not longer a curve anymore. It is a mesh because it is coming from here. Actually we need to make a gate from here. There are several ways to do that, and the simplest way I think is to store a name attribute. Okay, so store name attribute, and we can call it curve vector. Okay, and let's use a name attribute. Okay. So now you see we got this. Okay, and let's just use a color ramp to invert that and make it just show end of this. And now we have the end of the brush, but also we need to delete some of it for both sides of this. So now we can copy this to here, and this is for the profile, so we just put profile. So let's put it over here, okay, and and we can delete some of it. Just copy this. Yeah. Now we just take a look at this. It starts from one side to the other, but we can use this for it to work both sides. Okay, so that is a very basic form of it. Now we can kind of like smooth it out by using blur attribute. So let's take that and use a set position. And so position over here. So we just want to blur it position itself. So let's do it like that. Okay, so now you can see you have this water like. We can blur more like this. And you can use subdivide surface. Okay, so now it kind of sort of like a brush. And now we just give a thickness. We can put it before the blur. So the thickness, we can use extrude mesh. Over here, click off the individual and give the number relatively small. Now it looks like this, maybe even taller. Let's see about the face orientation. So now you might see something is facing toward us and this is facing backward. This is something that is kind of just without control. That is just because of the auto calculation for the curve. When it be draw, the blender will give a count for the facing of the curve. So that is just unfortunate sometimes. But in the like a more complicated node I built, we can control that, but that is much more work. I will not talk about that too much, but we can avoid that. Just give a thickness overall, so it will not have this problem. So now we have this two mesh. Let's use the joint geometry. Put it over here. Okay, so let's see. That's the original mesh, and that is the extrude mesh, right? And we use this joint geometry to join them together to here. Now you will see this gap between them. That's because although they should be in the same position, but they are not glued together. So when we blur them, they will be separate. So now we have to using merge by distance to here. Okay, so now it's being merged, but the distance is too big, so make it like as small as possible. Now if we go to see the face orientation, it is still have problem. That's because we need to flip this, flip face to here. Okay, and now it's all blue. It's perfect. So that is the easier form of this mesh brush. So the extrude, which is for the thickness, we can make it smaller. Now the thickness is even, but if you see my previous video, you can see we can make the thickness not quite even, which is also come with this curve factor. We can use that. Let's duplicate this. Let's just math. So you see this stroke, the beginning of it, the end of it is thinner, something like this. Maybe if you can, okay, so that's like that. And also you can use this for the profile, choose the width of it. Let's try to do this. Okay, just add. Okay, so now the side of the brush have thickness and the middle it doesn't. You can combine this noise texture something for the stroke so you can have better detail. Okay, so that is basically how you do the mesh brush. And let's see how do we make fine brush in the normal, which is in the texture. So now we have this curve factor and also this profile factor. So now we got this and this. So we can use that to join them and use that kind of like the UV of the brush in my note. I do have that. Let's see, UV. Okay, so you see I take the name attribute vector, which is I call that curve CF over here, curve vector, and this profile vector, and I combine them with XY, and I store this name brush UV, and I take that in the material, which is this brush UV. So let's take a look at that. So now it looks like that. So let's see if I just put it per factor, and this is profile factor. You see, I think you understand what is going on. 0 to 1 or 0 to 1. This is 0 to 1, 0 to 1, right? And if you combine it to the XY, it will become the UV of it. You use that in the material part. You just use that to control the wave texture. Wave texture is kind of like a line texture. If without some detail, it's just like a line. If it combined with this UV, it's like the line will follow path of the curve. So that's how we get this combined with some detail, because the brush will never be like an even, right? So combined with some detail, you can get this like a brush detail, and you feed that to bump, and it become the fine brush of your brush. It become this thickness of the fine here. And of course this is very useful in the other part. Maybe you can use that to mix your color or some other stuff. That's everything about simpler form of this. So now you know how to build the basic form of this mesh brush, and you have an idea how it works. So now I'm going to dive into the full node tree. So first, of course, just curve, and then this part capture some information for the target object, which is like this image, like a human model, or just like a plane. So I capture some information that I might use later, position of the target object and the normal. And this part is for like the coloring, to capture the UV of this plane, and I transfer that to the mesh brush curve. That's how you get the color. So like this is same idea as this video. I do it before for the hair curve. if you want to know how it really works, you can go check that video. You can take that knowledge to here. And here is just like profile line that we just used. But instead of using like a curved line, I use a arc. That's how you get this grill to be curved like, not like a straight line. And you can have the switch between them. So this is earlier just using straight line, but in my full version that I use arc. And here it's just like a capture bunch of attribute, so I can use that in the later of the full node tree. Some attribute is best that you capture in the beginning because you have some information that only in the beginning. Just if I invert that to the mesh, it will disappear. So capture some attribute. And here is for trim. You can put a trim before it transfer to the mesh, so you can trim the curve. So that's how you make the animation. Okay, and this part is for like the width. And this part, very important part of it, is controlling the tilt, which is how the curve will stay on top of an object. The chord of it is actually this. So that's how it works. It's a little bit hard to explain. Will not do it here, but if you are curious, you can have a look. So that's the target object novel that I captured earlier, and I use that to here. Okay, so that is that. And the other just like a noise over the curve, and this is for the extrude. And here this part is for curve to mesh. So that's what I just did in the simpler version. Curve to mesh is over here. And after that, I also make a bunch of the attribute, so I can use later on in the further of the tree. And of course the UV, so it's very important for the defining the UV of the curve, and also you can make the detail of the brush. After we use curve to mesh, I delete some of the face, right? So you make this breaking part, that is this break brush. It's a little bit more complicated than that I just did earlier. The tips and the tilt, which is the beginning and the end, and also the side. And I use some attribute, which is like the UV and some render index for each string to drive the noise texture, so each brush will not affect by the same noise texture, so they all looks different. And here just some math to calculate detail. And I make a lot of this like a bypass through the whole node tree. So you see all here have this bypass, and other places have this bypass. The bypass just means like a switch on or off, because some function that is not necessary, when the value is set to 0, it will bypass the whole function of this, so I can save some calculations. Overall, your node tree can be more flexible. Yeah, so that is the bypass, mostly just using switch and just do some logic for it and just switch. And here it's like a warping, or a warp to the target object. This is the thickness, similar to the easier version of this. Extrude mesh and flip face and join and merge. So over here it's switch for the fast mode. So the fast mode will bypass all this, so it will not have the dropping, and it will have the lower resolution. It all this part is about the dripping, and you can have a look very quickly. And this part is also something work with this dripping, but it's called fat, the fat of the drop. So that is controlled by here. Okay, and it is the final warp for everything to be very thin, and this is subdivided and smooth. And at the end of everything is something about the material. So this part is similar to this, about capture the UV of the target object. This time it's captured by the mesh. In earlier it's captured by the curve. Capture both of these attributes, and I use it here so I can mix them and just some other attribute that I capture. So that is a very quick look of Node 3. Get a very quick idea how I implement all this setup. Now you know how to make the easier version of this, so you can develop your own. Maybe you have a better idea than mine. Thank you everyone for watching this video, and all my supporters on the Patreon. Don't forget to subscribe and like the video. See you in the next one. Bye bye.